Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Drew Rubin from ChiroSecure. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening today. Today's going to be another great episode. And what I want to focus on today, as someone who was so fortunate to know Dr. Larry Webster, both in the classroom and outside the classroom for several years before his untimely passing in 1997, I gleaned a lot of amazing information from him, very specific information about specific protocols for certain kinds of issues that we're going to commonly see in a pediatric practice. Very important for me to tell you, though, that everything we're going to talk about today, even though I'm going to talk about certain conditions, he was very clear in making sure we all knew that chiropractic is all about salutogenesis. It's all about creating health. So we're not really working on conditions. We're working on people. We're working on kids. We're working on pregnant mamas. But he happened to notice certain things, and that's what I want to talk about today. So let's go to the slides. Thank you so much. So that particular reason I love this particular picture is that bench that you see that little munchkin on. She is lying on a bench that Dr. Webster made himself personally and sold it to me personally in 1993 when they had one of their first major ICPA seminars in Boston. That table he brought up from Atlanta. And I was talking to him on a break one day, and he said, "You need this in your office." And I said, "I can't fit this in my car." He said, "I don't care. You're taking this particular bench with you." So that bench is something that Dr. Webster made himself. And he personally sold it to me. So I have this really big, beautiful place in my office that is like Webster's little corner, so to speak. But the thing that's really important, and this is fascinating, because yesterday I was talking with some interns and other students, and they were saying that some chiropractor that they met was talking to them and saying, "Well, what you're going to do when you're just a baby or a little kid is you're going to take an adult adjustment and you're going to kind of put it into a littler package." And this would have made Dr. Webster go bonkers, because one of the things he said all the time was adjusting kids is not, repeat, N-O-T, not like adjusting little adults. He was very, very clear on making sure you understood that. He was very clear on saying the real key areas that we want to look at with a lot of kiddos is what he would call, back then, he would call top and bottom, right? Now, today, we would call that, parasympathetic, right? But then that really wasn't the nomenclature, and it was top and bottom. But that he was so ahead of his time. Like, he probably understood the polyvagal theory before even Stephen Porges figured it out. Like, he got it. This guy, I wish he was here. I wish he was here because, he invented the infantile headpiece. He invented a Webster technique. He changed the way you do Logan to make it a very quick, kind of an adjustment instead of a longer process for your little kiddos. He changed sustained contact. He kind of, had his own little tweaks on sustained contact. He did so many things. I wish, he passed in 97. God knows what he would have done in the last 20, 30 years if he was still here, but it is what it is. So there are just, we have to follow in, what does they say? We're standing on the shoulders of giants. Well, he was a giant. But this is what Webster was really amazing with. And what I'm going to talk to you guys about is that he kind of got patterns, right? And once again, like talking about the salutogenic concept, he was very clear in saying, we're not adjusting kids with asthma, kids with ear infections. We're not curing anything. What we're doing is we are seeing patterns, and we're applying certain things to certain patterns, right? But he was very, very persistent in saying, but I want you to understand that we don't take care of conditions. We're not a condition-based practice. So that's what I really want you to get at, because you look at something like this, you could say, like, let's say the right hand one. You see there's two open whites on the, so there's a pattern, right? But you got to recognize that, right? You have to be able to recognize that. And some people just say, "Oh, it's just a bunch of colors like a rainbow." Yeah. But there's a pattern at the end, and the end is that each one of these things has two white shapes of some sort. And you need to be able to understand that. And that's what this is all about. So what I did is I took some of notes that I'd taken in some classes that he had, the ICPA classes that I took with him, and the and this pediatric class I took with him when I went to Life University, when in his pediatric class, that I am so blessed to be teaching now. Wow, talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. And I created this kind of chart, because this is how my brain thinks. My brain is a chart thinker. When I kind of see this chart kind of visualize in my brain, and I see charts for functional neurology and for activator. This is just how my brain works. So I'm showing it, in that sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over some of these things, these patterns, but understand, once again, we're not treating like birth trauma or nursing problems or torticollis. What we're doing is we're noticing a pattern and trying out these pattern interrupts with our adjustments and see what happens. So as an example, in birth trauma, you're going to see a lot of issues, most likely in the upper cervicals, lower cervicals, and upper thoracics. Because if you imagine what's happening with the traction, right, of the cervical spine and the head because of just a traumatic delivery with someone using their hands aggressively, or forceps or vacuum extraction, these are the areas we really want to focus on. Nursing problems, especially look upper cervically, because what Dr. Webster would say is, nursing, you have to rotate your head, and rotating your head, right, that's atlas on axis. So that's what you need to really look at. With torticollis, you need to look at, based on what's going on with the torticollis, as to what issue there is. Now, with a little baby, obviously hard to figure this one out. This is with older kids with torticollis, like someone who comes into your office who's a teenager or a preteen or a preschooler who can talk. So torticollis, if they have ipsilateral pain, in other words, they're bent to one side and the pain is on that same side, look upper cervical. If it's they're bent to one side but the pain's on the opposite side, then look to check the lower cervicals and upper thoracics. That was his pattern interrupt, right? So once again, we're not treating these specific things. We're looking for patterns and interrupting a pattern. We're taking care of a person. We don't treat anything, right? The only thing that we talk about treats is in the office is on Halloween, right? Trick or treat. Otherwise, there's no treating. There's no treatment rooms, right? We've completely gotten rid of all that medical terminology. With allergies, it was brilliant. He found that there are 4 kinds of allergies. That's what he would talk about in his classes. You get a kiddo with nasal congestion, look upper cervically. You get a kiddo with thyroid issues, look lower cervical or upper thoracic. You get a kiddo with either adrenal issues, very hyperactive, and have allergies, or have food allergies, look in the mid to lower thoracics. And if you have a kiddo with a lot of digestion issues, like constipation, diarrhea, etc., and they have allergies, look for the lower, the lumbars and sacral region. Now, and once again, this is very interesting. For asthma, he termed this, and I haven't heard this a lot from other places, but he termed this either wet or dry asthma. So if someone has wet asthma, in other words, like you hear me coughing, it's not asthma, but I'm getting over something. You have this productive cough, right? Look upper cervically and sacral lumbar area. Excuse me. If you have a dry cough, so someone just like cough all the time. This was me when I was an asthmatic. That's how I got into chiropractic. And once again, my chiropractor didn't say, we're going to cure your asthma. What my chiropractor said to me in 1984, he said, let's see if those nerves going into your lungs are working the way they're supposed to. And if they're not, maybe by adjusting you, maybe your body can heal itself. And you can guess the end of the story, right? But for me, my big subluxation was T4. That was my big subluxation. So I would tend to add, it's just me, not just the lower cervicals for asthma, but also the upper thoracics and the mid to lower thoracic. Maybe T4 is a mid thoracic in his brain, because I think sometimes people think upper thoracic is just T1 to T3. So maybe the mid thoracic, but that was mine. It was T4. And my chiropractor way back when, he said, understand what we're doing. We're not getting rid of your symptoms. That's not the goal. When I first started care, he said, the goal is to make your body be better, right? That's really chiropractic's goal, make the body better. In kids with croup is kind of like bronchitis, but you see this a lot of younger kids, and they'll do a lot of coughing, and their coughing often sounds like a dog, like a barking dog, like this really deep, low cough. look upper cervicals and upper thoracics. You get kids who get a lot of UTIs or they're bedwetters. Check mid to lower thoracics and lumbars, and especially sacrum, and especially with bedwetting, S2. That was a big one that Webster used to talk about, is S2 as a place for you to kind of really make sure you're looking at. Dysmenorrhea. So with dysmenorrhea, once again, two different kinds. If you have more traditional dysmenorrhea, where a woman is having issues with her cycle, check that mid to lower thoracic and lumbars and sacrum area. But if you have a person who's got thyroid issues and the thyroid is contributing potentially to the dysmenorrhea, then look in the lower cervicals and upper thoracics where the thyroid innervation is. This was probably one of the most important ones that Webster ever told us, which has been like a major player for me. We just had a kiddo yesterday who came in, had a raging ear infection, and this is what we're looking for. Is he would call it the hidden C2, or counter rotation of C1 and C2. So C1's out on one side and C2's out on the other side. And often what he would say, Webster would say, is very often what you'll see is that you'll adjust one, and then the other one will all of a sudden appear subluxated. Whereas, so like you're checking, you're saying, I don't find C1 and C2 together, and you adjust one of them and then check, but then check the other one and see if that, whoop, all of a sudden it becomes, it's as if it was, that's why I call it hidden. It was a hidden subluxation. And it kind of came out because of your first adjustment. Now, so a lot of times you'll miss this. And that's what he would say, is a lot of people would just adjust like C1 and that's it. And they wouldn't recheck C2 afterwards, or vice versa. So make sure that you're always checking and double checking after you're doing, especially with kiddos with chronic ear infections. Fever, you're checking T10. T10 is major innervation for adrenals. He used to say, if you got a kiddo and they're having a fever issue, making sure you're checking those adrenals, because that's a critical area with those kiddos. Colds, upper cervicals, of course, because you want to make sure the immune system is doing good, but also make sure you're checking that mid to lower thoracic, that adrenal area too, because lots of times kiddos with colds will have fevers or some fevers that go on and off. Febrile seizures. Luckily, Webster was able to see that there are two areas you need to look at. Upper cervically, of course, because that's where all the brain respiratory innervation kind of stuff resides, but also mid to lower thoracics, your T4-ish area, checking the lungs, etc., checking the adrenals, those kind of things. A kiddo with tonsil issues, make sure you're checking the lower cervicals. Now, yeah, you'd say, well, upper cervicals for tonsils. Well, of course, because that's going to be something that is innervating all the immune system stuff. But the innervation itself is seen in the lower cervicals. So making sure, once again, this is pattern, pattern recognition. So we're looking for a pattern. And if you happen to, let's say you're adjusting a kiddo who's got these chronic tonsil issues and it's not resolving, are you checking the lower cervicals? And that's really what this is about. Like using these charts is, the concept is to say, if first off, if a kiddo has these things, maybe look at these things. Or if you're dealing with a kiddo who is in the midst of this kind of stuff, check and see if the pattern, and maybe sometimes, like Webster would say, even the best of us can miss things. So maybe something needs to be checked that we didn't think about. So check those lower cervicals for tonsils and adenoid issues. Colic, upper cervically, of course, makes sense. Vagus nerve, to make sure that the whole the digestive system is working good, but then also making sure the mid to lower thoracics are going good, so the digestive system is working as good as it can. I would hasten to add, just me, this is not Webster, but I'd say sacrum too is a big one with this thing too. We adjusted a little baby the other day who hadn't pooped in like 4 or 5 days. This was crazy. First adjustment. This was first adjustment. I did our Logan adjustment, right? Then we did our cranial adjustment, and then as the mom was sitting the little kiddo up, boom, blowout. Like I had to go into the bathroom, change. Not only change the kid, how to get throw out the not throw. Put. They said, do you have a paper, a plastic bag, a Kroger's bag or something? Because they had to put the onesie was trashed because of the blowout. So it works. So make sure you're always checking sacrum when you have a kiddo who's got any sort of colic, reflux, constipation kind of issues. And jaundice, of course, lower thoracics to checking, the liver area. There it is. Constipation, upper cervicals, and your sacral area. There. So see, I knew Webster had it in there somewhere. Diarrhea, though, he would say you want to check the sacral area too, of course, but also the mid to lower thoracics to make sure that the innervation into the intestines is going good. With a child who's toeing in or toeing out, but especially toeing out because that's way more common, make sure you're checking the IN ileum. Make sure you're checking the IN ileum. However, also make sure you're checking for hip dysplasia, because I've seen a few kids over the years, been in practice now 34 years, I've seen a few kiddos where they have one foot that's toeing out, and that's their presentation, and they're 12 months to 14 months old, and the issue isn't an IN ileum, it's actually they have a dysplastic hip on that side. So my suggestion is to do an Ortolani's test, sort of modified. I know it's usually for newborns, but I'm suggesting you do a modified Ortolani's test to check and see if both their hips are opening up evenly, or one hip is kind of frozen. Comparison, you can't get that hip to move this way. This is going nicely over here, but this one isn't. So make sure you're checking that. Webster was very big in making sure you check that. Headaches, you want to check for sure the upper cervical area, especially the occiput. Make sure you do an eye exam on these kids. That's what he would suggest. Sometimes these kids with headaches are having trouble reading, especially nowadays with how much on their cell phones and on their iPads. Very important. But also check the lower cervicals and upper thoracics. And another thing he would say is sometimes there's trigger points in the upper thoracic area, in the traps also. And sometimes you might need to work on a trigger point in those for these kids who are getting these chronic headaches, because that's a huge thing that we'll see. And we might see even trigger points on the occiput and along the trap areas. And the last one is for morning sickness. We've seen tons and tons of mamas with morning sickness over the years. And upper cervicals, of course, once again, vagus nerve, but then also checking the mid to lower thoracics as well. So I wanted to share these things with you because the ICPA and ChiroSecure, we are both these organizations, very committed to kids. Very committed to kids. That's why ChiroSecure has these great talks. I mean, Dr. Monica Berger, Dr. Eric Kwalke, myself, others, always committed to kids, which I really appreciate. I'd speak for the ICPA if you're interested in learning more about how to take care of kids on the spectrum. That's my thing. 50% of my practice is kids on the spectrum. So I would love to see you at one of our seminars. That would be fabulous. I have over 550 now episodes from my podcast, ChiroCast. So if you're interested, I'm doing a Green Book series the last several weeks. I was asked to do a Green Book series. So almost every week I've been reading a Green Book selection and then kind of talking about it. So I'd love to hear you or to see you commenting on ChiroCast. And it's now on YouTube. So I'm on Amazon, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, all over the place. And ultimately, the big thing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because we got to protect our kiddos. And I absolutely thank ChiroSecure for having me on this platform. It is such an honor and a privilege to work for a company that has been my malpractice insurance since I graduated in 1989. It was the first place I turned, and I've been there ever since. And they're loyal to us, and I'm loyal to them. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions about what we talked about, please let me know. There's my email. I'd love to help you in any way I can. Love to see you at ICPA seminars and Life University seminars. And thank you so much. Have a great day.
Today's pediatric show, Look to the Children, was brought to you by ChiroSecure.